Right, here we are talking about coaching. My name is Yannick. I'm super excited to be here with Christopher, Chris? I didn't ask. And we were chatting in German this whole time.
Yes.
So,
Christopher is the full version, the carrier of Christ, literally.
the
And
carrier
Chris
of
is,
Christ.
yes, and Chris is just Christ. So you can call me either way.
Yeah, let's get into the metaphor.
What's the heavier burden, to be Christ or the carrier of Christ? We don't know.
That's a good question. But carrier can also be illustrative of a bunch of different things. It might not be so literal, although it makes sense that two Germans sitting together taking things very literally.
Yes.
Well, Christopher Kabakis, you bring so much to the table. I won't read it all out. I've gotten to know you through Julius making me aware of Evolute, the Evolute Institute, and we're always looking for interesting guests. And we should really talk to Christopher. That's why it's sad that she's not around. But you're doing very interesting work, retreats, but you also done work in communication. You've been coaching for quite some time. We always start here with, well, if you were sitting at a dinner party with a bunch of coaches and somebody asks you, hey, what do you do? How do you respond?
I would say I create spaces for deep inner work. And that covers coaching, relationships, but also what we do in the retreat programs, up to holding space for psychedelic or altered states experiences, of course. And that would be the starter. And then, I mean, coaches might know that as an answer, so it's they might not find that so interesting. But most people that are not coaches would probably say, well, I mean, what does it mean holding space for deep inner work? What is deep inner work? What does it mean to hold space? And so on. And so then you would probably kickstart the conversation. But I'm also like next to being a coach, like a facilitator and trainer. So giving trainings in the corporate or company context, mostly in terms of communication, sometimes a bit of leadership, but mostly communication. And I'm also affiliate professor at ECP Europe, which is a business school.
The business school.
I think the oldest French business school, or the oldest European business school. I don't know. I'm also the co-founder of Evolute Institute, and I would definitely mention that because it's kind of very special work in a way, using altered states of consciousness to catalyze developmental processes. So that's how I would start, and then we would see what they would ask, what they would jump on, and then we would continue.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the industry of, well, I want to say we're in the industry of deep inner work, but actually a lot of coaches probably wouldn't say that. I mean, every coach probably wants to do deep inner work, but actually I think there's a lot of coaches who are quite happy in I've done, a weekend or 3 of coach training, and now I help people slightly adjust behavior or find pragmatic ways towards solutions. And when the deep inner work knocks on the door, they might refer out, or they might feel a bit lost, or they find themselves in supervision with me and they're like, what do I do? And when do I refer? And how far can I go?
Yes. I mean, it's not just the grow tool, right? That probably every coach learns. I would say, I don't know if you agree, but that the tools part is maybe 10 or 20% of what makes coaching effective, and probably the largest part is kind of a mixture of enlisting a firm commitment from the client and being present. So this kind of space holding, this being present and attuned, the space holding part, 20 to 30%, I don't know. And then you have 50% is probably having really a commitment for a process. And that will do lots of work, kind of, and not kind of the grow tool or the inventory of X or Z or Y or whatever other tools or techniques people use. I don't know if you'd agree.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers are difficult to quantify, right? But when you say process, what do you mean? And maybe to frame that question in a bit larger way, as I'm curious about how you found your way into coaching, how you approach coaching, maybe where you trained, because coaching is more than just a process, but also process plays a big part of it. Yes.
So I did the kind of formal coaching training in 2014 at the Berlin-based center, Coaching Center Berlin, which is ICF certified. And I did this on the side, basically, while working for an agency in communications. So, and there I was doing the kind of TED-style speaker coaching. I was just starting out with this, and so I took what I learned from the business and personal coaching training and applied it to the communication coaching jobs that were kind of emerging at the agency, and where we built like a department of speaker coaches coaching TED style or for TED style talks. And so my first coaching work was more in the communications, on the communications side, which then is always more than just kind of coaching in the sense asking good questions, for example, and holding space, but it's also you put in stuff, right? So you guide also, you give advice, and you share insights about the TED preparation process for inspirational, motivational talks, right? So it's we called it always speaker coaching, but then of course, if you give feedback on a draft, you also give feedback on the content or on storytelling and storylining, and this is more than kind of the strict definition of coaching. So it's always was kind of a mixture then of guidance and maybe training aspects or consulting aspects and coaching.
But then also when people give these kind of talks, they're always also facing themselves as they are on stage, or their relationship with otherness. Or, I mean, it gets quite personal, no? Is that also your experience?
Yes, I mean, especially if you have stage fright, of course, if you're insecure about public speaking, which is a lot of people, but we also coach people who are very experienced speakers who give lots of talks, and then the challenge is it's a bit different because they are overconfident, and you kind of then need to see if your coaching can extend to creating an opening for being coachable, because it's in their mind, they did not necessarily, when they signed up for the TEDx conference, sign up also for coaching. So even though it's kind of being communicated, every speaker gets a coach and is expected to work with them on their talk to make sure it meets the quality standards of TED, of course, and to also give some insights into what they will be talking about, so the program can be curated well, the speaker flow and so on. Most speakers are open to the coaching, and some would then say, no, I don't need coaching. We had a very famous French author who flew in for his TED talk, and he had refused coaching and said, I don't need the coaching, Christopher, I give so many talks every day and I don't need the coaching. And then I'm sitting there in the audience looking at this, and I think some coaching would have really helped. But if you try to communicate your 500-page book in 18 minutes, and then with lots of formulas and asterisks, and then lots of footnotes with the thing, and it's this is not like a TED talk. It might be a good academic talk if you have 2 hours and you give all the details, but not a good TED talk. So there, our framing was really, we help you to understand the format TED, which is a special format. No, make it personal, have a strong beginning start, have one single unifying idea, not many ideas, not too much. Try to speak freely, and so on and so on. So that was kind of those early days were speaker coaching days. Yeah.
So then, how did it transition into deep work? And
yes,
when did psychedelics arrive on that stage?
Yeah, they arrived on that stage, and in my life quite late. I mean, I had my first psychedelic experience in 2018. So I was 38 years old. So that was my first psychedelic experience. And before that, I had explored more regular, forms of inner work. So I had coaching as a client. I experienced body work, and I really liked it. I did a training in somatic work. I participated in the Hoffman process. I don't know if you've heard about that one. It's a week-long kind of process and so on. And so this was part of my own kind of learning journey, but also kind of then my journey to being able to hold better space for others, of course. I believe, I don't know if we get to that, but that only if you do your own inner work, work on your shadows, you have the capacity to then hold space for others without being overly triggered. You might be slightly activated as well, but I mean, without being too activated. So you can actually hold space for strong emotions and deep stuff. And so I was doing this kind of for my own personal integration and developmental journey, but always with an eye to every training I did, like with an eye to how can I apply it, what can I do with it also as someone offering something for others. So like in the coaching work, you could say, and so and this first psychedelic experience was really because I got a recommendation from a good friend, a coach friend, to look into both kind of a certain form of bodywork and also into psychedelics maybe, at a point where I was a bit dissatisfied with the status of my life, kind of how it was going. The classic thing that also my co-founder, I think, mentioned, kind of outwards, everything is going well, you're successful and everything, but inside kind of feeling dissatisfied and not feeling like not realizing fully my potential. And so she suggested kind of to look into this. And then I had like a friend who shared his experience from an ayahuasca experience. And he did this in a very compelling way, I have to say, that at least I got curious, but I was still very skeptical. So I was like, I'm not sure. My head is my working instrument. I don't want to end up thinking I'm a Tetra Pak, like a milk box, milk a package or so on. So all the prejudices that
what's that metaphor?
Like it's sometimes people would say, at least in Germany, like you can get hung up on something, on a drug, and then think you are like a milk package, like a milk box, like where the milk is. It's a Tetra Pak, no?
Yeah, I know Tetra Pak. I just didn't make the connection. What that you like get deflated, or that you can get folded, or what is it?
No. I think that you just believe you're something you're not, and you're like something absurd, like a piece of food or so.
You just kind of lose yourself and in the experience, and you just kind of go crazy.
Exactly. I don't think it's about being folded or so. I don't know.
I don't know. I was trying to make a connection.
Not unfolded, but yeah, no. And so I had my own reservations, and I needed to read the full Michael Pollan How to Change Your Mind book, including the neuroscience, the case studies, the history, and his personal journey reports, before kind of being open to considering it. And so with a little help of friends and guides, and then with Michael Pollan's help, I was said, okay, so actually I can't break anything permanently in my system if I'm screened properly, or if I know I don't have medication, don't have a risk for psychosis and so on. And if, of course, I do this in a safe setting and with substances that can be safely considered safe. So like psilocybin, which is vast, has been researched quite a lot, and where you can know that actually it is not dangerous. And so then I was kind of... Sorry?
All the research that came out, has changed a lot for the public conversation and people's relationship with it.
Yes. No,
as limited as it is still.
Yes, exactly. Especially around psilocybin then, right? Because LSD had the stigma, so people were not researching on that anymore. And so they did the psilocybin work, which is also good because it's shorter. So actually in a shift of two medical professionals, you can have one client having this experience, so 5 to 6 hours. So it's a shift of a person is 8 hours. So it's easier for the cost structure of the clinical trials than having the LSD experience, which is like then 2 shifts of people, or ibogaine, which is like probably 72 hours and more, a couple of days. So but also, I mean, the risk profile, of course, not neurotoxic, not hepatotoxic, and so on. And then, as you know, the only risk is kind of a challenging trip or a bad trip, but there, of course, your own preparation, the intention, and the strength of the holding container and the integration are vital for influencing that. So I understood as much from Michael Pollan and my own further research, and then I was ready. And this experience was quite profound and in a way life-changing. I mean, it led me to later then co-found Evolute Institute and build it to what it has become. I mean, it kind of really reconnected me to my body in a way that I hadn't been connected for many years. I was much more top-heavy through socialization, I guess. So the process of going through school and university mostly, but also through trauma, I think. And this kind of made me realize how much you could feel potentially and be in your body and feel. And so this opened like a new phase in a kind of doing even more body work. And now, for example, I'm doing like a 3-year training in somatic experiencing in trauma therapy after Peter Levine. And so this path was really, I think, catalyzed by my first big psychedelic experience, which was with psilocybin truffles in the Netherlands. And then it also opened, which was very unexpected, this the ancestral field. I'm half Greek, half German, or you could say part Greek, part German. I don't know if it's half really. And this Greek part was a bit had been cut off because I was grew up here in Germany, and the relationships between my father and his parents was troubled and complicated, and so we didn't have much contact with them. And so somehow this whole Greek ancestral stream, you could say, was kind of shut off, and somehow it got opened in my psychedelic experience, and I saw the Greek earth of my forefathers, and this yearning to actually be in touch with the land and the people and the culture. And so then afterwards, of course, I booked like a language course on Crete and went and so on. So all of those kind of things. But it also later in constellation work and in work with Thomas Hübel and in the Timeless Wisdom training he offers, so like this kind of developmental program with a mystical overlay, let's say, there was a really great ancestral work. So kind of working through ancestral trauma or intergenerational trauma and work. I think I would have never gone to Thomas Hübel's program in the first place. Would have been too woo-woo for me before, I think. And I would not have done the ancestral work, I think, and being open to it and then being able to allow stuff to be processed without this first big psychedelic experience. Mm-hmm. So that was the second thing. And the third gift from that, only one, I mean, the first psychedelic experience was this feeling the connection to the full evolutionary process and to all of life. So I had literally in front of my eyes the primordial soup where life originated, and then all the iterations of animals, fish and amphibia and mammals, and then apes, and then us, and feeling this great connection to this tradition of life in the biosphere, and feeling the responsibility, gratitude, and also a call for leadership in a way to make something out of it, to be responsible stewards of this, or be part of that. And that was also very unexpected. It was like, now I would say it was a spiritual experience. At the time, I wouldn't have said it's a spiritual experience. It was like a powerful experience, like a very meaningful and touching experience, but I wouldn't have called it a spiritual experience at the time. But now I would be more liberal with using the word as well, and understanding that spiritual means what connects you to the whole.
Yeah, bigger than yourself.
Whatever that means. And some people might prefer universe or cosmos, and others might say God or the divine. Or in that experience for me, it was more like evolution and life. Like, so nature, you could also life. And so these three things were very profound for me. And when I came out of that, and then a second experience, 6 months later, I went to a second deep dive, let's say, to deepen the exploration of some of these topics. When I came out of that, I was like, how can I integrate this into my work? Like, and can we bring this work to people from the business or organizational world? So because my clients usually are from companies, organizations, both for profit or not for profit, including also academia, but mostly for profit and some non-for-profits, some startups as well, but bigger ones. And I thought, like, some of them or most of them, they probably wouldn't come to such a retreat as I created in the style that I attended, like say. And they would, but they would of course go to something that looks more like an organizational offsite or training program, and they would also respond differently to let's say, a grounded, scientific, professional approach. And so maybe there is a space where we can create leadership experience retreats, right? And bring together whole leadership teams or startup founders or individuals to a program that is a developmental journey, but not necessarily focused only on substances or so. No, it's not glorifying psychedelics, but really emphasizing a developmental journey.
And then the
as part
psychedelics
of
become
that,
a tool or a part
Exactly.
of the process. But actually, what
Exactly.
they're coming for is not a psychedelic experience. What they're coming for is being a more authentic leader, or innovation, or team building, or
Exactly. And still, yes, so that was definitely kind of the idea. And still, of course, when you talk about such a program, what then attracts people is still the psychedelics, because they think, well, that's new, that's unusual. I mean, I know
that'll
meditation.
give us an edge.
I know coaching, I know meditation, I know yoga, I know breathwork, but this seems really like a bit out there, but in an interesting way. I mean, no, if they are like someone who feels a calling at all. And so while we do emphasize everything that is beyond or outside of the substance, and we see it as a part of it, people might still come because they have the safe professional space for having the psychedelic experience, right? So, and the media, of course, also when they might write an article about you when you do psychedelic work, but not if you just do a coaching program.
Leadership
then it's
retreats,
like, so yeah, that's not new. So it's also, of course, while it has its downsides, it is also an attractor of attention in a potentially positive way. So
yeah, well, I'm sure we have many things to say about downsides, but let's lay the foundation out a little bit more, right? Because
yes.
I that's the conversation I had with Julia, and that's also part of the reason why we're talking and why we wanted to expand the guests of this podcast to people who work in organizations, because I remember seeing I read an article about Esalen in California. That was always had a big psychedelic element. Stanislav Grof was there. Everybody was there, right? And then it went through a couple of changes. And I read this article, it must have been like 5-6 years ago, where it was now under new management and leadership and more catered towards, executives from Silicon Valley. They had a few pictures there, and one I looked at and I'm like, that's an ayahuasca setup. The article never mentioned anything in that direction. But I'm like, I think, I know a lot of people in Silicon Valley were microdosing, probably still are. But there's got to be a market for, young startups looking for an edge. There's a huge potential for innovation. I mentioned team building. It sits weirdly in my mouth because what I always thought was I wouldn't want to build any sort of peer pressure to engage in something that you're only saying yes to because you want to be part of the team and you want to be a team player. And you mentioned that calling bit is super important to you.
Yeah.
So I'd love to talk. I'd love you to talk a little bit into the space of how to introduce that into organizations. Why does it make sense? And how do you navigate inviting people into that? How do you balance inviting them or waiting for the call?
Yes. So I would agree with you that making it part of a team building initiative is probably not the best, because then people might be compelled to participate just to stay part of the team or the whole experience, while they would not be comfortable otherwise to have a psychedelic
That's
experience.
potentially very dangerous, and you don't want those people at the retreat, really.
Yes, and you have the hierarchy in there. Of course, the boss says like, "Let's all go." Then you feel like compelled, and so on. So what I like much more is kind of having a group of peers joining. So like a startup founder team of 3 or so. This, I think, it's almost like ideal, or those kind of setups, or that people come individually, and of course then have their organization finance it or co-finance it or so on. So to make it like a development activity, officially kind of sanctioned by the organization, but not to have like something that pushes people to participating in an organization. And so that has also been our experience, that actually mostly people come individually, and we had founder teams joining, but also interestingly enough, often they prefer like to say one after the other. So we had like 3 founders of one startup, one after the other participating.
They joined 3 different groups, or
yes,
also
yes, exactly,
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Exactly. 3 different groups. Because it is also, of course, something that you get so open and vulnerable with people you have to work with, and maybe you don't want to share everything with your work colleagues.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand this even more for bigger organizations where it's even more sensitive. In the founder space, sometimes people are also friends in private and are founders and so on. Then it's a bit different. You're already familiar with each other. You already trust each other. So then it can really enhance the bonding and the trust building at a deeper level. But I also understand everyone who says like, happy to have colleagues join, but not when I'm joining. To have like
well,
a
even
serial,
your friends,
serial
you might
approach.
not. Even with friends, you might not want to see some friends see you in a state where you're just really out of it. I mean, there's friends, and then there's the kind of friends you would just be very transparent with and let them take a look into your soul. And there's other friends that are more acquaintances, right? And especially
Yes.
if we work together, there's certain lines you cannot go back from.
Yes. Yes, I mean, we did have people who know each other well, such as romantic partners, couples, married couples. We had brothers, and we had father-son even. And then we would, so this is of course not the organizational context, but the personal context. And then we would say it can work as long as you're there for your own process, basically. So you're not there to do couple therapy as a couple. That's not the right setting then in a group setting. But for your own process, and your intention is also not directly related to the other person in the space, because that might impact, of course, your sharing then in the sharing circles and so on, and create like weird dynamics. And we are not, we don't do couples therapy or father-son therapy kind of, or something like that, right? So it's a developmental space for a group, and people are there for their own processes. Yeah, and in the organizational context, so then I think it is very interesting to do teamwork in the sense of this peer level founder teamwork. It's the easiest way I can see that, or individually again.
I'd love to dive in on the coaching. I'm curious about your process to help people prepare or integrate these experiences, because we could talk this whole hour or two about retreats, right? But I see retreats as the part that unlocks the experience, and where the coaching really comes in, unless you also have a coaching approach to working with the groups, right? Feel free to talk about that. But when I say coaching in this space, and maybe we can put a frame around it or kind of define it a little bit more, I'm curious what you got trained ICF style coaching, but also there's mentoring and somatic elements coming into it. You were in consulting for a lot. You gave guidance, right? So my assumption is probably you integrate to some degree when you work with people. But I'm curious about your process, how to help people prepare for an experience when you coach them, and how to integrate their experience after that.
Yeah, I would say, so it's like our main program where we work with psychedelics is kind of a retreat program that involves 3 weeks of preparation and 1.5 to 2 months of integration. And as part of this, you have both a small group process, which then involves facilitation, and you have 4 one-on-ones with each person that you could call coaching sessions. And sometimes now we prefer to call it guidance sessions or so on. It has elements of coaching, but it's also guidance. So it's similar to what I said before with the TED style speaker coaching. There's also something you give in, and you give orientation when it comes to the psychedelic experience or information, right? But you also try to get to the intention of the client, which is like similar to an intention you might have for a coaching process, of course, a regular coaching process. And then you accompany the person through this whole experience in a one-on-one setting. So we have 6 to 10 people in the retreats, and we are 4 to 5 people on site, and then we divide them among us. So each of the coaches then, or one-on-one guides, has 2 to 3 one-on-one coachees. So we stay very close to their processes throughout the whole experience of, let's say, 3 months, which is at the center of the 4 days of retreat. But you have the preparation integration. And the preparation for the experience after the medical psychological screening, which happens first, and make sure you're actually safe to participate. There's a questionnaire, there's a one-on-one with a medical doctor, and so on, and a group fit call. When, let's say, the program then really starts with the group, this consists of 3 2-hour group sessions. And there it's kind of getting to know each other, so the facilitators and the other people in the group, to build trust, familiarity, and starting the opening up process. Also clarifying for yourself what your intention is by sharing it in the group, and then hearing the others and what they are looking for, and so on. So we start this whole process, which is then deepened in a way in the one-on-one, which the first one-on-one is really about this intention and how to phrase it or frame it, and maybe also how to make it stronger by adding some metaphorical or visual elements, by getting into like a little guided visualization of it, how it would feel to have that. Have that means to have the quality present, for example, in your life or so, whatever you're looking for. For example, feeling full self-worth. If your intention is
classic coaching invites somebody to actually imagine what that would be like. So it just gets more color, more meat on the skeleton, so to speak.
Exactly. And how would it be if you were kind of a person who is loving themselves fully, and how would that look like in your life? And you kind of visualize it, of course, and then of course you can also, in classic coaching would also say, okay, this is today, this is the future, what could be, why you're not there? Well, there's something, of course, and the obstacle, of course, that can be projected to the outside, or you can see it in your inside. And then if you take it to yourself and you accept that it probably also has to do something with yourself and the inside, then of course we can take it into the whole program process, and also use it in the psychedelic experience to go deeper and to explore it, right? What is the source of your lack of self-worth? Maybe before you already knew, and you would say, well, I know already that my mom always criticized me. She always favored my brother, and I was always treated differently and more harshly. And it seems like I was never good enough, and so on. So the person already knows it has to do something with the mom, but they're not clear on what it would take to heal that problem, like to address it effectively, right? And then hopefully, as part of the program and the psychedelic experience, they would get an answer or process something that still needs to be processed in terms of old pain or grief or and so on.
Oh yeah, often the quality of the experience or the learning is based on the quality of the intention. So, as it is in coaching, some of the most important work that we do is figure out what they're here for and what they're working towards. And I think it's similar here.
Yes. Sometimes you could say your intention is like it's priming you for certain things, right? Or it's like a mood. It configures something in some way. And so, of course, the intention doesn't guarantee that something is covered in the way that you might have expected, but it makes it probable that something in that space will also be addressed, right? And so you have to have the good balance between preparing and having your intention and walking with this question you're having. And at the same time, being open that something else might be shown to you or revealed to you that is maybe more relevant, more important.
And this is the surrender to the experience part of thing, like keep it in the back of your mind, but then just allow whatever happens to happen.
Yes.
Requires a lot of trust in my experience. And when people come into psychedelic experiences without that trust, that whatever happens, happens. I remember sitting in like early experiences, really trying to hold on to my intention. I'm like, no, I should be doing some work,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
really tried to think more about, or focus more on the intention of what it was. And obviously that wasn't really the way. But what's your experience when people come in and they either, like, there's two elements to that question. One is, what if people are too focused on the intention? And the other side of that coin is, what if people really just kind of want to go with the flow and they're not particularly goal focused, and they really struggle with setting an intention? To what degree do you encourage them or work with them to arrive at something that is clear?
Yes, I mean, you use the word goal as well, but for us, intention and goals are two different things. And goal is something you can reach, and it can be measured outwardly in behavior or something more. And the intention is often more like a quality you want to be more present in your life, and something that can be lived on a daily basis, right? To be more compassionate or self-loving, to stay with the example from before, right? And so we would say, well, you don't need to have a clear goal, but it's worth working on the intention. So, of course, we have people who come who say, like, well, I'm just curious about the psychedelic experience, so I want to have the experience, and I don't have a special intention. But then we would still like encourage them to maybe look at their lives and think like, okay, so is there anything where you would like to see some sort of change? Is there something that doesn't serve you anymore that you could let go of? Is there any rigidity or pattern or habit that is? So we would like open the space a bit in the conversation and see if there's still coming something beyond, like, I'm just curious on about the experience, right? Most people do have like some kind of deeper yearning, which is why they feel somehow attracted to maybe to the psychedelic experience. Also, like there is something that they already sense could be facilitated by attending the retreat program and having the experience. And then it's like kind of to open that up and to zoom in and to see what's there. So for this is for those who say like, I might not need an intention or so. Then for those who are too focused, I mean, we encourage people to walk with their questions throughout the whole prep journey. So at least for the 3 weeks where we really start to build the container and prepare. And you get, of course, a lot of content and information, and how do psychedelics work in the brain, and how do we think about vertical development, how do we think about the consciousness, and so on. And all of this should stimulate your process also. We also invite you to reflect on your life journey so far. So that can take different forms. One form is, I don't know if you've heard about this, a Triple H exercise. So who's a hero in your life? What was a hardship in your life, and how did you go through it? And what is a highlight in your life? So Triple H, hero, hardship, and highlight. And if you start reflecting on that, of course, you also start the process and so on. So I think there's enough stimulation to kind of to help initiate that. And then shortly before the experience really starts on site on the second day, we tell them, and now let go of your intention. So you did all the prep work, and now we say like, no, now you let go. And now you open yourself to whatever wants to happen. So you completely let it go. And as we have been building the trust and the container people, actually, I think they can do this in a movement to let go of the intention. The inner movement of letting go of the intention. I think this is something that they can do. What they sometimes then can't do is kind of release control generally, right? Because of course, this is the biggest fear.
Degrees of skills in that.
Exactly. But for this, we also, as part, and you asked about the prep process, I think it's very important to teach people about resistance, avoidance, and acceptance, and how that works. How to spot when I'm resisting, what the different forms of resistance are, how I can resist, which is, of course, in many different ways, and to become aware of it, and then learn techniques for self-regulation, and for navigation as well, in a way. And so we teach people about those ways, so that it's easier then to let go and to interpret the different things that might come up in a useful way, right? So, I mean, you know this, what you resist persists, and so you should not fight your experience. If you fight your experience, you will needlessly suffer. There's a good suffering, kind of the necessary suffering, and there's needless suffering. And needless suffering is if I fight my experience. And so, of course, whatever is there, kind of that I sense, like, okay, I'm getting anxious. Okay, I have learned before I can regulate myself through the breathing, through feeling my body more. And so I do that. And then, okay, I work through it, it changes again, no? And then something scary comes up visually or in the body physically through tensing, I notice maybe. And then I say yes to it, I welcome it, I say hello, and see what happens when I approach it and not withdraw or try to get away and so on, you know. So those kind of, this kind of psychoeducation, psychedelic psychoeducation, or not psychedelic, I mean just psychoeducation, helps then, of course, in the moment to then let go completely. Not just of the intention, but also of your tendency maybe to try to control your experience.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, when we help people prepare, it's an interesting conversation because I've met coaches who are still completely facilitative in that part of the process, right? And you can get the psychoeducation elsewhere, right? There's plenty of videos, there's plenty of books, there's plenty of people who talk about how you can prepare for psychedelic integration, for a psychedelic experience. But I think as part of retreat, it makes perfect sense that there's a hybrid of psychoeducation, sharing information, inviting, encouraging even, and then opening a facilitative space when they set their intentions. Where else would you say it's more important to facilitate rather than to guide in that preparation phase, if any?
I mean, what do you mean specifically? Because, so for example, we have the format of sharing circles, right? The sharing circle is facilitated. I mean, you establish some ground rules. For example, only one person speaks, and the person who has the talking stick, which in our case is a talking turtle, it's a little turtle, goes around and
it moves slowly. I like it.
Moves slowly and is wise. So encourages you to and then the others, of course, they are briefed in a way, so we don't judge, we don't we try to be fully present with our full mind, heart, and body to the sharing of the others, and we don't think about our own experience, right, and what we already want to share, and so on. So you say that's all facilitation, the establishing the rules of engagement for the exercise, and then holding the space for the first experience, and I mean, mirroring and affirming experiences and facilitating the handing over of the turtle and so on, whatever. So, and this is important. And then we also have one-on-ones with each participant before the ceremony, and usually in the kind of format of a walk. If the weather permits, we have a walk one-on-one, one after the others. And so this is more coaching. And then, of course, we have also a final Q&A on the night before the psychedelic ceremony, where it's really more about giving information. So how does it work? What will happen tomorrow? What about the dosage? Whatever questions might still be there. So it's always for us a mixture of these elements, giving information, facilitating, or coaching. I don't know if how you do it or how other people in other coaches do it, but during the psychedelic experience itself, we don't interfere, let's say, proactively. We don't have coaching conversations or so on while people are on their substance. So there we really give space for their own inner exploration. And it's more facilitating and holding the group space, right?
Yeah.
During the ceremony.
Given that you've spent all of this time in group and one-on-one with people leading up to the experience, as they kind of come out, the peak has passed, right? At some point, there's this transition into starting or wanting to start conversations with people around you, right? Especially if there's somebody you trust who's a coach, who's been there accompanying you on that journey you are aware of their intentions. How do you navigate, or maybe it doesn't even happen, right? Depending on the setup. But I'm curious about people wanting to then get into conversations and maybe even continuing the coaching. I mean, it's part of the reasons why I don't sit with clients, because I would find it so tempting to want to have that conversation, because some of the most valuable conversation I've had when, a couple of hours after it peaked and you had a conversations that just really changed something. And I couldn't help but imagine, what if that conversation I've had back then would have happened with a trained coach who, just helped me to go deeper on that while I still had the snow globe shaken up. So I'm curious about how does that happen in groups, or how do you prevent it if you do, or how do you respond to it?
Yeah, so we will actively tell people before the ceremony, and also as a reminder later in the ceremony, that they should take time for their own processes today and tonight, that there will be ample time to talk about it tomorrow, the next day, so that there will be sharing circles and exercises to bring this into conversation, but that today and then tonight, also in the evening, after the 6 hours, so I mean, usually we start at around 1 or 2 p.m., so 6, 7, 8, it kind of ends. We officially close the ceremonial container, and then there's a dinner, and we encourage people to actually stay with their processes mostly. Of course,
Throughout
we can
dinner?
talk about, yes, and also afterwards, so that really people don't share also with the other participants and about their process. Of course, if there's some technical stuff they want to talk about, can you pass me the bread and so on, of course they can do this, but not like
what a metaphor.
but not like kind of already start the sharing about the experience, because we think it's not over yet, and we want to allow people to stay with it and to gather more fruits from it, and people can of course journal also towards the end of the ceremony, to kind of extract their lessons also in a written form. And we have some exercise that is usually drawing also, which is still on the first evening. So they do express their journey also in visual form through drawing. And they can use it the next day if they want to talk about the experience and explain it also. But we would not kind of encourage them to talk. Now, if someone is really upset about something and wants to talk to one of us, of course we will be available for that. Yeah, but not kind of, oh, that's so exciting, I learned this and that and that, and already to share. Not this kind of sharing. And now you said like you like it actually if this kind of interventions from a coach happen, or when they have happened, it was beneficial. You shared.
Well, I never had that coaching while I was on an experience. I just, when it's not a retreat setting, and you're there with a friend, you start talking to you. It's not in that setting that you this is your process and I'm here to work. If it's more recreational, then it's a very different kind of setting. And
it's
then
true.
you have lots of conversations.
Yes, and that's a completely different, like let's say a recreational setting with friends and so on. Of course, it's much different. There in this, it's almost a bit like you're very susceptible, of course, to influence under the direct influence of the psychedelic, and the closer you are to the peak, of course, the more still. And so a good coach, of course, would only ask questions, but then if they're being asked like questions, they would kind of maybe answer and give guidance or say things, and that can, of course, be very I mean, it's kind of a deep impact, influential.
Yeah, and even just asking a question. I mean, it's impossible not to lead in any way. So
yeah, of course, and so we assume that also we don't know the experience of the people, right? So just because they look in a certain way, they look like they would benefit from a conversation. No, you don't know what they're experiencing, and they might still be on it. And so we really want to protect that space and not interfere too much in that. And see the integration phase and the sharing phase really for something that is the conversational part of the integration phase starts only the next day. That's for the group setting that we have. I think it's we feel more comfortable with it this way.
Makes sense. Just wanted for a moment, because I didn't want to interrupt you earlier, but you mentioned screening. Do you use a particular protocol when you screen, or something that was validated, or did you create your own questionnaire, or what's involved in the screening?
This was created by my co-founder, Dr. Dimitri Achelroth, with the support of several medical doctors, so psychiatrists and other doctors, to have like a best-in-class kind of questionnaire, which is very comprehensive and covers, of course, the clearly medical or drug-related questions, but also more psychological dimensions like adverse childhood experiences and so on. So it's kind of our own creation, but of course based on the best-in-class standard that exists outside and the consultation with medical doctors. Yeah.
Are there any questions in there that you wanted in there specifically for the coaching context or for the organizational context that you wouldn't find in the standard screening questionnaire for a piece of research, for example?
Not for the not the medical psychological questionnaire. We do have another survey we do, which is separate from that screening, which is before and after. We deliver it before and after the retreat experience. And that asks about certain dimensions of personal and also leadership development. So certain statements, and then you rate it on a scale from 1 to 10. How happy am I with this and that in my life, or and so on. And there is also the professional dimension is also in there, and also even the intention is already kind of collect information on the intention is already collected there. So this is kind of our own internal research. So we do it with every participant before and after, and see if there's been a change in the fulfillment and the scoring of those dimensions. And we had people fill out the mystical experience questionnaire, but on their own terms in a way, because they had the intention of having a mystical experience. So generally it's not ours, but we did have some participants that I don't know what these religious people have. I never had anything amounting to a transcendent or mystical or religious experience, and once in my life I would like to know what these people experience. So, and this person then did the mystical experience questionnaire before and after, and he also came back for a returner event and did it then a third time, and he looked the progression of the scores for that particular thing. So but for the personal, professional or mindset kind of related things, the mindset related questions, we have our own kind of little questionnaire or survey questionnaire.
Reminds me of post-ecstatic growth. Because I've got a positive psychology background, so
yes.
It was already exciting to study post-traumatic growth. But then a colleague of mine started researching post-ecstatic growth, and I'm like, oh, this is often such an ecstatic experience. I mean, it doesn't have to be psychedelic, but anything that is just connecting you to something larger, or that's been just really good. Could be sex, drugs, rock and roll, psychedelic experiences, or just a really flowy work project, or something that has just been joy or ecstasis, and then a coaching process based on that is just fascinating, right? So my experience with coaching around psychedelic experiences was almost a little disappointing, in a way that it wasn't very different to how I would usually coach. I thought for some reason it would be different, and it's different, I think, when it comes to preparation. just because of the everything that we talked about, right? But when it comes to integration, how to make sense of a weird experience or an ecstatic experience or a particularly meaningful experience, so to then integrate it into the way that you carry yourself forward, it didn't really differ when it was psychedelic or non-psychedelic. So I'm curious about your experience around that in the integration process.
Yeah, interesting that you say ecstatic. I don't know how you would say it in German, if you would say Ekstase or if you would say Rausch. Because interestingly
Ekstase.
enough, Ekstase, yeah, because Rausch is like often, I feel like it's framed in ways that are not so helpful. So if you frame it in here, you get your ecstatic experience, then it's kind of, it promises just great feelings, but not kind of deep insight and
Rausch
deep
often has
self-trans.
connotations of like benebelt, like a cloudy kind of,
Yes, yeah,
kind of little fucked kind of,
yeah,
you
almost
know.
like drunkenness or like
Yeah.
inebriation or something like that, right? So and of course it's not clouding your mind; it's more like clarifying your mind. And of course, it does not necessarily feel good. I mean, of course, you can have like an experience, or parts of your experience can be beauty and awe and love and connectedness. But of course, many people also, as part of the experience, have more difficult parts of the experience where they process stuck emotions and
Ecstatic can also be quite challenging, right?
Okay, yeah. If your vision of ecstatic includes challenging, then yes.
For me, I mean, now we're getting into the nitty gritty, maybe it's more than we
Yes.
need to, but like,
Yeah.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So so your question, like the second part. So, so if we talk about deep coaching, so not just empathetic listening or guiding people through a set of tools, but like deep coaching, this means creating a deep resonance space, so with great presence and attunement, where deeper emotions and feeling and insight can emerge, right? And I think if you are a skilled coach and you can slow down, you can create that trusted relationship, you can attune, and you are not afraid of holding certain emotions and their intensity, then yes, that is very similar to any deep process work that also could be done through somatic or bodywork techniques, or that can happen when you're under hypnosis or when you're as part of meditation stuff that comes up and that is being processed. So I think they're all very similar kind of in their effect. They help you connect deeply with something in you and integrate it. Right, so that's kind of for me also the idea of development in a way. Kind of you include and then transcend, and then you have more capacity, more inner capacity. And so, as originally at the beginning of a conversation also said, like then it's more like psychedelics are more like a tool. But I mean, for anyone who had a deep psychedelic experience, you're like, no, that is not a tool I use. Maybe I'm being used by the experience. But it's a bit like egocentric to think I am using the tool in the case of psychedelics. But of course, you could say it's from an ordinary state of consciousness. You would say this can be a tool or a catalyst for me for my own personal process, and I approach it with great reverence and respect for consciousness in my brain, respect for the substance and its power in my system, and then for whatever that means, what we can experience, the great respect and awe and reverence. So yeah.
Sorry, can I jump in there, because
Yes.
I think that's a really important conversation, because especially in organizational contexts, my experience has been, I mean, I haven't. My experience has been that organizational contexts are much more towards how can we get benefit from using this process, rather than I'm engaging a wisdom, or I'm engaging a space, or I'm gonna, ask the mushroom for guidance, or, it's more, Generally, my experience
No.
was we want to get somewhere and we want to do this for either individual reasons. I don't want to call it selfish necessarily because it has negative
Yeah.
connotations that
Yeah.
don't need to be there. But we want to move towards something for myself or for the organization, right? I think people who feel called or feel resonance with psychedelic spaces and have learned a little bit about them, it's much more likely that they're open to something that is more spiritual in the sense that you mentioned earlier, right? More connected to a greater good. But there's going to be a lot of people who want to use psychedelics just like they use microdosing as a productivity hack,
Yes.
and I think that's the conversation where a lot of people say, do not introduce this into organizations because they're just going to milk it. And that's not what that's not what they're here for. So, yeah, I'll pause there and see what you think.
Yeah, I think everything can be used and abused in a way. Coaching as well, mindfulness. Now there was this big discussion about introducing mindfulness systematically into organizations. SAP, for
Like
example.
a mindfulness.
Yeah, okay. So and then okay, super. They get even more productive and more stress resilient, and so that's useful for us. It's a problem that in the capitalist logic, of course, everything is subsumed into this overarching logic. We need to grow, we need to increase performance, and so on. So of course, everything it touches, in a way, there's a risk of it being contaminated by that logic if you're in a for-profit logic. At the same time,
it also works.
No? It works. It might also be subversive in certain ways that might not be appreciated. But it can also be used in a manipulative ways, of course. In the cases where there were shamans, for example, crossing boundaries or influencing participants in their retreats and so on. So you can see there's also an abuse potential that sometimes happens even. And in organizations, you could see it as well. I mean, the CEO kind of would owner CEO would kind of
let's innovate.
Exactly. So of course you want to want that logic. So I would say it takes a certain level of maturity already and readiness to look at shadow parts. So maybe you would say it's not for everyone. It's not for every organization. But if you have a very mature organizational culture with mature leaders who would like to experiment with it in responsible ways, I think then there is a space to explore. But of course, you don't want to roll it out organization-wide to make people more work better in a certain way that you envision. So when I would say, okay, can it be used for leadership development? It's more like for personal leadership, so self-leadership. And then, of course, your own process. Okay, with the inner work I've done or I'm doing, how can I be differently or better with other people as well? So my team or my ecosystems, my organizations. So starting from the inner process. So it's less kind of a business development tool or a classic leadership development program. It would be more like for self-leadership and then starting from there, leading others and maybe your ecosystems or the organization. So and we would use it also, or recommend it to use it a way a good coach works. And then because you work with what's there and what the person wants. So you're in a bit like agnostic. I mean, of course, you will not coach a mass murderer to become more effective to mass murder. But I mean, you work with what the person wants and try to help them achieve their goals. And that might include, of course, that you question also critically some goals or see if there's something deeper, of course, than if it's just like, I want to have the fuck you money by age 30, I want to be, and then of course you can ask, okay, and then when you have that, what's then? What's then? Then I'm happy. Okay, let's see. So in the service of the individual, and it's safer to work with individuals than to work then systemically from the organizational point of view, I would say. Yes.
Have you ever said no to someone who wanted to attend?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, I mean, there's like no for medical reasons. And
Yeah, well, that's a clear one. Yeah.
interestingly, we have, or medical psychological, we have like many people who apply who are more like suffering and have a diagnosed condition, and they would like to have help with that. And they've heard that psychedelics might help. But then, of course, we can't, it's not part of our mandate. We cannot create a space for clinical therapeutic work, right?
Different retreats for that, yeah.
Yes, and well, not so many actually, but yeah, there's clinical work being done, and then you can hope to get on a clinical trial and so on. But there are not many spaces, and then in certain jurisdictions, of course, in Australia now, licensed psychotherapists could do this work, and in Switzerland, of course, get the permit from the health ministry and so on. You can do psycholysis, but generally, there's much more need than can be covered by professional licensed programs, right? And so that's also, we often have to say, no, it unfortunately doesn't fit. We cannot do that. You have medication, we can't like accommodate bipolar and so on and so on. But then, of course, there are also people who might have heard it from someone like a peer. Oh, that's great, and you should have to do it. And then they come and say, like, I want you to do this for me. This is a great experience. The next thing I want. So this is a great next thing I need you to help me get. And there, when we realized sometimes that it's not a good fit to the group, or there's no readiness to look inside. And one case, for example, he, as part of the exploratory conversations, I mentioned that we have a scholarship program, and so that people who can't afford it financially, they could apply and have like a greatly reduced contribution. And he said, like, oh no, but that's not, then this is not for leaders. I mean, people who like, I want to be with other people who actually can afford the program, like who have that successful that they have no problems paying the full price. I don't want to be with some random dudes from Neukölln, actually, he said, which is funny because I live in Neukölln, in Berlin. And he just wanted to say
pretty
something
random,
like where the people live, but he didn't know. But I was like,
I get what he's pointing at.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So and theirs was not a good fit. So we said, like, no, I don't think it's a good fit. And so it does happen. So the interesting thing is, of course, there's some self-selection happening. Of course, if people somehow they need to learn about our work, right? So they will visit maybe the website. So you get a certain impression, and then you feel like this is your space or not. And the way they talk about this attracts me or not. And so
it's already self-filtering.
Yeah, we hope, and mostly it's self-filtering. But then, of course, you have the first conversation, and then it's also a filter, because then people might not get back, and they've opted out, self-selected.
Sometimes you have to post-filter actively.
Yes, and that also happens, and it can, for medical, psychological reasons, for the screening, but also not willing to look at themselves and to do some inner work, or not being open to a group experience, of course. Then, of course, I mean, if it's just like I don't feel comfortable with a group, you can also have a private retreat. If it's kind of sometimes it might be like in the case I just shared, then it's definitely not a good idea to do this. And then it also says something about your set of development or your character, and then you might not even want to offer a private retreat.
That makes sense. I'm just looking at the time because I want to respect yours, and you said, well, let's aim for like an hour and a half. I think we're a bit over an hour in.
Okay. Yeah.
One question I definitely wanted to ask is, if you think about your one-to-one coaching work, right, the more facilitative sessions, they're not part of the exercises or the group sessions information. What would you wish you had known when you started out doing one-to-ones?
Yeah, I mean, when I started out, I thought I need to deliver much more on all dimensions. I mean, you said like not a content session, but I would make my coaching sessions to content session by talking a lot and giving a lot in a way, and using my mind to make sense of things and so on. So definitely I talk much less. I'm more comfortable with silence and going down, which is not easy because I like to also be quick. So kind of to get into the right mood for being like calm and grounded. I would have liked to know that known before that enlisting the commitment of the client is such an important part of a successful coaching process. And if you just assume there is commitment or that the person really wants it, then it might like fizzle out at some point, and you might think it's your problem, like that you did not do your work well, but actually it's not during the coaching sessions then that it happened kind of at the very beginning, or when doing the Auftragsklärung, so the clarifying the scope of the process and the task. And I would have, I mean, it's not knowing, it's being. I would have liked to be able to be more before. But of course, I can't like anticipate my own development process. So of course, I could just be the way I could be. So what I said before, like it's to be present and to be able to hold space for things is of course something that you can understand as a concept. But then if you have to do it, it's different. And I, of course, more than 10 years ago, I could not hold certain things. And then, of course, what I would do is, of course, I go somewhere else to still have like the process continue. And mostly that means going into the head or sometimes even into humor, because I wouldn't have dared to touch the difficult emotions in a way, and my system unconsciously preempted that. And so, of course, and I can only imagine how it will be in 10 or 20 years and doing some more inner work. So, and so this having a good feeling for whom you can hold space and for whom not. So to not just say yes to a coaching client because you want coaching clients because you also want to make a living as a coach, but then to say like to have like a feeling also for maybe I'm not the best person here because it scares me a bit, and I can't stay comfortable with this, and then to recommend someone to someone else. So I would have probably done this differently for some clients in the past. While at the time I was more entrepreneurial, and now as self-employed, you say like yes to everything. You're lucky you get the client, so yes, you do it. And then also good stuff might happen, but not the deepest stuff or what really needed to happen that maybe then did not happen. And then, yeah, probably they looked for someone else afterwards and hopefully had the process at the time.
Yeah, and there's this saying that you can't take people further than you have gone before, which I always found challenging phenomenologically, right? Because I mean, I'm an existential coach by training, so what the hell do I know? And it's actually much easier to work with someone if I hadn't had anything close to their experience, right? So, but I think something that you said earlier frames this super well in terms of I need to be in a space where I'm not distracted by any conscious or unconscious experiences or feelings that come up for me. So if somebody's talking about something that, does something for me, I will want to have worked through that to a point where I can hold space for them, right? A good quality space with quality presence. I don't need to necessarily have done all the substances that somebody else has done, but it's good to get a sense for the landscape and to have dealt with my own shit.
Yes. For example, what I found challenging for some time was if we had a female participant who had like a history of sexual abuse, and then I was getting a bit insecure about like, okay, should I be the one-on-one coach or it's better like someone else suited? And of course, then the topic of touch is always tricky and needs like consent, especially like emotionally supportive touch, of course. And I noticed that
during the experience, you mean?
Yeah, for example, offering a supportive touch, of course, during, and then, but of course, we would this we could address before, of course, and ask the person about it, and then also, but even if the person then said, "I don't mind being touched by anyone of the team," I would still not go during the ceremony and offer my touch, and that's interesting. So there was something in me that kind of was like, no, I'm a bit insecure. Maybe if it's not interpreted well, and then or suddenly, and there's something in there, And I think
Especially during an experience that you're so susceptible to vibes or very subtle gestures, you know? So if somebody's a bit insecure about you, then you'll pick that up straight away.
yeah. But I don't mean that if they are insecure, kind of in the sense that they signal, I would prefer to be touched only by a woman. That's clear. That's no problem. But if they say, no, I don't mind, I would still have the kind of, I'm a bit careful here. Which is maybe also wise and good, but I was just noticing that, okay, there's also some fear of being perceived as then a perpetrator or an offender, and I don't want to have the repetition of and that, even if the person didn't say that she would mind. And it reappeared in my somatic experiencing training I'm in. So there are different trauma categories. One, of course, is inescapable attack, which is you're being attacked, and that might be just physical violence, but it might also be a sexual violence. And then, of course, you need to be able to hold the space for that trauma when you do this somatic experiencing work. And I noticed that I had some fears around that. So I didn't want to go too close in a way in this process. And so I brought it into supervision to kind of talk with, like to address this, my own fear, but also kind of, also the technique, of course, of how to work with it and when to go, how there. And I noticed that this got better, for example. And I feel more comfortable going there. But this is very interesting. So that was definitely something where there was some fear in my system and I couldn't hold space so well for it. I was noticing that I was kind of, whatever, maybe can go somewhere else. So interesting.
Also,
and
I just want to celebrate for a moment because I think you might be the first guest who brought up supervision by themselves.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Which I found flabbergasting. I think it's such an important part when you work with highly sensitive topics, themes, contexts, environments.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so crucial.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a skill part then. No, you might get input on how to deal with the case, but it might also surface more shadow material where you thought like, or where you don't want to go. And so why I brought this up actually in the first place was because you said like, do you need to have the same experiences or have gone where the client has gone? Well, of course, I don't need to have experienced sexual abuse myself to be a good coach or therapist for someone who has this issue. But I need not to be afraid to hold space for it. And my example was there, I was not comfortable at the beginning. I was sensing some insecurity and my tendency to actually avoid it. And this can be at a disservice, of course, to the client. It will be at a disservice to the client. Yeah. So, and so there, you don't have to have the same experiences with everything, but you need to be able to make sure you have, you can hold the space. So you have to have worked through any issues that are there in your system related to the issue. And
it gets maximized when you actually sit with people during an experience. I think if you coach, it's already important when you coach leading up to an experience and integrating an experience.
Yes.
But as soon as you sit with people in this altered state, it's absolutely vital.
Yeah, and the projections that happen can be really quite intense. And so then if you need to be able to deal with the projections on you if you're engaging, right? And that's not easy. Which is also maybe why it's safer to say you have your experience and later we talk, right? Because then you don't have the counter transference on hyper speed, like on supercharged
steroids.
Yeah, on steroids, exactly. Yeah. Because that would demand. Yeah.
We're going over.
No, it's okay.
I think unless you wanted to talk about something else, or you wanted to say, well, actually, there's a point that I think it's really important to just voice or name, or maybe put a question out there to coaches. If there's something that you wanted to put out there before we go to our quick, not so quick fire round, I just wanted to give you some space to see if there's an angle, a perspective, a question, something you want to put out, talk to me about. This is also dialogue.
No, I find it really interesting, this intersection of coaching and psychedelics that is in the name of the podcast. Because for me, it's not necessarily coaching during psychedelics. It's more like holding space and helping with developmental processes in general. And then, of course, as part of this, there can be a psychedelic experience and so on. So it's not even that I kind of frame this as something that is together. So I would never say I'm a psychedelic coach. It doesn't make sense to me. So I'm like facilitating developmental journeys in a way. And as part of this, of course, there's coaching.
Part of it, yes.
It's part of it. But like to have a psychedelic coach, what does it mean? Or psychedelic leadership? What does it mean? So for me, those terms are really confusing. And so I would say if you are interested in working with people, or you are working with people, right? And whatever, I mean, that can be therapy or coaching or bodywork or counseling or whatever. And are interested in psychedelics, then, of course, then it's good to have psychedelic experiences, to do your own inner work with psychedelics or without, and more without, I guess, than with, but also maybe with. And then, of course, see what is a way to work with this responsibly. And for me, it makes much more sense to be in a field of practitioners. So more like to have like a group space, because then you also have multiple facilitators with different backgrounds, a team that can work together, and to learn through such a context, than to think I become like a psychedelic coach or something, and then do one-on-one without having benefited from exposure of a longer time through like a field of practitioners working together in the service of people, or like groups. Usually, I mean, you don't have 5 people for one person usually, I mean. So it is usually it's group spaces then, and you have like a group of practitioners, and then try to learn as much as possible from that. So for anyone curious about this, not to get hung up on the terms maybe coaching and psychedelics, but see it in a larger context of wanting to work with people, helping people with developmental topics, and then see how can you get exposure. Of course, you can also do a training and like, but there's only so much you can learn like in the trainings on offer in the internet, of course. So it's I think more like the best learning happens through osmosis. So in combination with reflection, of course, and exchange, but through this exposure. Maybe that kind of, without having been prompted, like just share.
No, it's good. I would prefer the term psychedelic assisted learning journeys, for example.
Oh, yeah.
Because it leaves it quite open, right? And it's not a psychedelic learning journey necessarily, but it's psychedelics offer assistance. The experience offers assistance, and coaching is a learning journey. It just doesn't sell so well. So, but yeah, I see that coaching is part of the facilitation process. That makes a lot of sense, and especially in your context.
Yeah. Okay, then fire away. What are the...
Exactly. So I think you've actually had a look at those questions many months ago. We talked about a little bit before we pressed record. So you come semi-prepared.
Yes, semi-prepared.
No expectations, no pressure. But what are some of the books or people that had an impact on your work, or that influenced the way that you work as a coach, or facilitate learning journeys, or run your retreats?
Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the most impactful reading and then discussion experiences based on that reading was Ian McGilchrist's opus magnum, so major work, The Matter with Things, which is 2 tomes, like thick books like this. I think in total it's 1,800 pages. He like worked 10 years on it. He's a neuroscientist and so medical doctor, psychiatrist, and also philosopher. And he explored kind of the role of the 2 hemispheres in our brains and how they generate attention, different kinds of attention or different kinds of consciousness, and what that implies for our view of the world and of ourselves. this, when I read this around 2 years ago, it was like a bomb in my an ontological, epistemological bomb in my system, and it took me a long time to kind of digest it and kind of work through it. And actually, I created like something that only senior citizens do, like a book club, a study group, like a reading club where we read like a chapter and present it and then discuss it each month with a small group of people, because I wanted to understand it even deeper and better. And so this has been enormously influential. And the reason why it is, and kind of it relates to also the psychedelic experience, is like, so the question is, what does it mean? No, what does the psychedelic experience mean? And can we, how serious should we take it? And if you come from a materialist scientific worldview, as many people in the Western world do, then certain things don't make sense. Kind of, how would you get access to that information in your psychedelic experience? It's not random. Obviously, it's not random. It's somehow new, relevant, surprising, but not random. How is it possible? And it doesn't square with a kind of our view as individuals, and that our consciousness or our mind is only in our brains and so on. And so, but then there's a lot of crazy stuff out there. So you also need to like look for kind of what are kind of reliable ways to rebuild your worldview. And in Ian McGilchrist's work, I found like a reliable, grounded, scientific way to integrate a materialist, a scientific, rational worldview with a consciousness is foundational worldview. And so this has been very, very influential. Yeah. Before that, I was more like into David Deutsch, as a physicist who wrote like a fantastic books, like The Beginning of Infinity as one of them, or The Fabric of Reality. But that is still like, it's a bit still more standard science. And Ian kind of helped me to cross the bridge really into the unknown. Yeah. So that's one of the books. I mean, it's more, but I spoke already a long time about one book. So it's, yeah.
Good. I'm trying to resist the temptation to respond to it. I just wanted to say it reminds me of when I read the Tao of Physics, Fritjof Capra, that I was studying positive psychology at the time, and it just made all the connections between Eastern mysticism and Western science and physics. Was excellent. So yeah, there's lots of bridges.
The Tao Te Ching is also a great book. And I also sometimes I'm the reading uncle at the retreats, and I read wisdom from the Tao because I think it's relevant. And it's also, because you asked about leadership, it's also great leadership advice. So how to deal with things and to being able to hold two opposing ideas in your system and still retain the ability to function. It's really useful because also contradictory, no? But it's very deep, and I think it points to really deep truth at an underlying level of reality. And so I also introduce this to some of our retreat participants, kind of, and always read from the Tao and so on. So yeah, that's also one of the favorite books.
You might want to read Complex Adaptive Leadership. It also draws a lot of those lines.
Yeah.
Okay, let's resist the geeking.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
What do you think about regulation in the, maybe not so much in the coaching space, maybe you might want to comment on the retreat space, but do we need more of it, less of it? Is it in the way, or is it important to keep people safe? Because there's a lot of people out there who do quite questionable things, but then also there's a lot of people who don't get to do the work because of regulations. So given that this is such sensitive material, what do you think?
Yeah, probably Rick Doblin, who proposed like you should have like a psychedelic driver's license, also an equivalent of a driver's license. So it should not be that anyone can buy it in the supermarket and do whatever, because that would create like people might hurt themselves and so on, might destabilize people and so on. So, but of course, I would not say it should be illegal. to use mind expanding or mind enhancing substances. So something in between would be that there are professional spaces where you can have the experience in a safe setting, and maybe have something, and this maybe as an entry experience. It should first be done maybe in a safe professional setting, and then later you can get like a driving license, and you can then get the liberty to experiment by your own if you have shown that you're responsible, mature in your dealings with it. So that's how I would do it. Should the so the industry, how it should be regulated, that's tricky, of course. There is like, of course, the Guild of Guides, there's a North Star Codex and so on, and people who want to do this work professionally, they subscribe to the code of ethics of these organizations, and they, if you're in the Guild of Guides, you also usually share case studies, discuss them with your peers, so it's intervision, or you can get supervision and so on. So I'm totally in favor of this. Should there be like the regulation it shouldn't be in the standards only if you have a PhD in something, or if you're a licensed medical doctor, psychiatrist. Only then you can hold space for psychedelic experiences. I think that would not be useful. It would exclude many people who are very talented and very experienced and professional. So I would kind of a self-regulating professional space. I think it's the best way to establish and maintain certain standards, and then people should go there first if they want to have the experience to know how it is when it's well facilitated and safely held, and then later also be free to explore themselves if they have shown that they can handle this maturely. This is kind of my personal take.
Thank you. Cool. Yeah, no, it's very sensible, I think. Given that you do deep work, right? And lots of coaches do deep work. At which point does it become therapy in your framework?
That's a very difficult question.
I know.
Yes. So if someone has a diagnosed condition by a medical professional, then if you treat that condition, it's therapy. So
that's the easy answer.
That's the easy answer. So yeah. Then can coaching work have a therapeutic effect in the sense of therapy being leading to greater wholeness? No? I mean, healing comes from whole, so making someone whole. Moving towards wholeness is kind of then healing, and therapy is trying to promote healing, right? So can coaching and also psychedelics outside of a clinical therapeutic context have a healing effect, a therapeutic effect? Yes, I think it can. And to make the distinction, of course, in coaching generally say, okay, if someone is functional and just has control over their lives, they can work, they have relations and so on, and then they have one issue in one dimension, then it's a coaching client. And if they've lost control of their lives, they're unable to work and to function properly, then of course it's clearly a therapeutic case. And then there's something bordering like in between where you have to see. And as part of our screening, for example, we also ask, like, do you have a support network? How often do you feel, do you have people with whom you can talk about personal problems and issues that concern you and so on? Of course, so we clarify kind of stuff at the edge of this, right? And of course, everyone is like feeling maybe down for some time after something bad happened. But then, of course, when does it become a depression? I mean, this, and then you have a clinical diagnosis. This is, of course, like then there needs to be someone needs to diagnose it properly. I would, for coaching, I would say it becomes a therapeutic experience when we touch material that has been stuck in our system for a long time and that hasn't been witnessed yet or brought into relationship. When then the space for this is there for the first time to be held in a relationship and being fully witnessed when those powerful emotions come up, then this is already a therapeutic experience, I think, in the proper case. Goes to the body, goes to stuck emotions in the system. So, and in deep coaching, I think you go there, but it's not, of course, therapy then and listed as therapy. It's just something that is part of what's holding the client back in their development. So part of the stuckness. And for this, I think it's okay and good to hold space, also as a coach. And of course, there are lots of side factors. Can someone respect commitments, be reliable, dependable, be stable between sessions, and so on and so on. And then you would also see, okay, I don't like this. People are missing sessions. They seem to have been destabilized by emotions coming up in the session. So then you would see, okay, it's a bit more. And then you have to see, can you address it properly, increase the sequencing, have more sessions in a shorter time, and to see, or do you feel like, I know I can't actually hold space for this, it's getting a bit tricky, and then maybe you would like to add a psychotherapist maybe, or hand over to a psychotherapist for this. So I don't know if that answers your question. That's kind of how I think about it. It's very difficult, as you know. I mean, it's very difficult. It's a continuum, and then where it's like the
Yep. Yeah, that's why they're quick, not so quick fire questions.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah, it's fire questions. True. Yeah.
No, it's good. It's good. As long as you're good with it. This may be an extension potentially to that question. Have you ever had to stop working with a client, not because you screened them out in the beginning, but because you started a process and then you needed to refer them out to therapy or just stop because it was no longer coaching? Or I know you're not so about that actual term, but like, has it stopped being a learning journey? I don't know. But yeah, I think the crux of the question is, have you ever started doing work with someone and then had to stop?
You mean as part of the psychedelic work? No, not. I mean, so we have one psychedelic experience, right? It's not that we have several psychedelic sessions. So then you would see that after one session wasn't good, and then you wouldn't continue. So if they had the one experience and then they're, for example, very emotional, then of course we're already in the integration process, and we need to see how we can make the integration process, the container, a bit tighter around them. And we had those cases where we had like extra check-ins from the respective one-on-one coach to make sure that the person is really doing okay, and offering like additional conversations in the days afterwards. And also in that case, we had already before also we shook hands with the psychotherapist the person was working with anyhow, so before and after. So we were making sure that they had like their next therapy sessions really shortly after the retreat, in addition to all the things that we are doing. And so there we when we sense kind of people are not doing so well, of course we encourage them actively to reach out to us and tell us, and but also we kind of then increase the support after the retreat, kind of in the one-on-ones, and then make sure that they have like a good person to continue work with on certain issues that might have come up. So, but this is not, of course, interrupting the process or stopping. It's more like making sure that the person is doing well, and that we. We did have people who did not appreciate the retreat experience. That definitely happened. It doesn't happen often, but sometimes. And then, of course, also, I mean, but this is not that there. Is it kind of so? For example, one person kind of then withdrew basically from the process as much as they could. They tried to kind of not have all the group sessions, and also did not want to have the one-on-one coachings anymore. So he kind of withdrew almost. He stayed on site until the end and left just a bit early on the last day, but he did not kind of engage with us and the process as it's kind of foreseen, right? So in the end, they kind of
they stopped rather
they
than
stopped,
you stopped
anyway.
it. Yeah.
Exactly. And we did have people who didn't like they felt the group processes from the others were overwhelming to them. So they withdrew from the group process, but not from the one-on-one, just from
Yeah.
it's like, it's too much for me, and so on. So those kind of
That's
things we
fair.
had. Um, yeah, we did not have to throw someone out of the retreat or so. Luckily, I know, for example, if people have they lied in the screening, and then they find the courage to say it on the day of the retreat, then of course you might be like, you have to see, if you can still, or if they then are screened out on site after they've arrived, which is bad. Hasn't happened to us, but I know of people where that happened. And then there is high blood pressure. If the blood pressure is too high, for example, on site on the day of the experience, it also would be a contraindication, and you would not be allowed to have the psychedelic experience. And so in this sense, they would also be like, then they can maybe participate later when the blood pressure is normalized. But
So you take blood pressure, you do a medical check on the day before you go into the experience?
Yes. Yeah. With people who have a history of high blood pressure, and who have indicated that there's something related to that as part of the screening, and then we definitely we track it, and we and with elderly people especially, we had like the oldest participant was 82 years old, and she had slightly elevated blood pressure.
Oh, wow.
And then of course you need to be super careful and check, but otherwise it's a voluntary check-in with a medical doctor. It's a voluntary check-in.
Yeah. Any words of warning for coaches out there maybe curious about doing this kind of work, or maybe even experienced coaches in this space?
I hope you appreciate what you're getting yourself into, and it's like it's enormous responsibility, I feel. So on many layers, and that's why I said it's not good to think that you can do it yourself without having really extensive experience and in different settings with different people, different clients, and having done extensive inner work. So I would really recommend to become part of a field of practitioners and have experience. And at the beginning, you just assist or you co-facilitate, but it's part of the field because it's such a it takes so much responsibility to hold space for other people in this way. And not just the legal element, but really like the ethical responsibility of doing this. And sometimes people might be a bit careless about it because they have had a good experience themselves, or they have like sit it for friends, but it's not the same, right? And if you offer this professionally, it takes a whole other level of preparation and professionalism to do this work safely. And of course, it's also not for everyone. Both to have the experience, but also not to facilitate for others. And sometimes people are very enthusiastic because of the impact of their own experience, and they want to do this. Similar to me, I have to admit, I was also quite enthusiastic. But it's a whole a learning journey, and it's yes. So try to learn as much as you can from people with lots of experience, and from a field where people are in those learning and supervision and processes that are kind of the hallmarks of professional work. And then, of course, see if you still want to do it, or if you want to do it, and how you want to do it.
Yeah, makes sense. If you could take over the screen or screens of any person or group of people, so you could send a message to the whole world. And I think you made some notes because you did look at this before.
This is
I'm really curious about your message and to whom that message might be.
Let me have a look, because as you said, like I wrote down some answers or some reflections like a few months ago, and then I was like I forgot about it. And what I wrote was like that I don't think like people respond much to a one-time broadcast generally. And they would probably freak out, and you would be hunted down by the Navy SEALs for.
God, what's your message?
No. No. If you had the power,
because
to
of
do
the
this,
technology. I see.
yes,
I see.
they would try
I
to
thought
find out
because
how
of
did
the
you do
power
it,
of the
and
message.
so it wouldn't make you very much happy because, and people would be freaking out because how could it be that you get like this message projected? No, so I mean, so the premise of the question is a bit dubious. I think it would have like the counter effect. It would not be like
Then
that you can.
let me give you
Yeah.
let me give you Tim Ferriss's version of this, which is if you put a billboard on the side of the road, and you could write something on the billboard. What would that be? Maybe that's easier. Then you don't have the Navy SEAL danger with you.
Yes. And for some time, I would have probably said something like, no, I mean, I don't know if the billboard, but the message is kind of for a long time. I would have said death is optional, and death is a curable disease, and those kind of things, which is more like associated with the longevity movement from Silicon Valley now, and so on. So and anyhow, I updated my beliefs around death, and so in several ways. So I wouldn't broadcast that anymore. Now I would really then maybe project is that everyone should do some inner work on the levels of individual, ancestral, and collective trauma resolution. So to look into it and to to look at the systemic factors driving our the conflict in the world and the polarization and the wars. And I think it would really be valuable to invite or incite everyone to do some individual, ancestral, and collective inner work or trauma work, but then it opens again the whole discussion. So inner work. So this is not an ad, like a branded message for making it really punchy. If someone is just driving by with a car, we would probably need to work on it. But kind of from a content point of view, that would be the message.
Cool. Hey, Christopher, thank you. Lastly, but not least, where can people find you and your work if people wanted to step closer into that sphere, or obviously maybe got interested in a retreat with Evolute Institute? Where do you send them?
Yes, I mean, so through Evolute Institute's website, of course, you find me. On LinkedIn, you find me. I luckily have a unique name. So there's, I think, only one Christopher Kabakis in the world, as far as I know. So you will find me. And then you could reach out through LinkedIn or through our website, the Evolute Institute website.
It's evolute-institute.com.
Yeah, institute.com, exactly. Yeah. So, and then you find ways to reach out. Otherwise, through LinkedIn, of course, as well. I'm happy to continue the conversation, also bilaterally, about certain topics, maybe not about the...
I'm sure death is optional had some people curious now. Yes. I mean, there's lots of things that people are probably curious about now. And I do want to say, I often say it in the other podcasts, this is meant to start conversations, right? So if any of this resonates, make it swing, talk to some people, pick up the conversation with Christopher or with a colleague of yours or with yourself, doing your own inner dialogue and inner work. Write about it, journal. We're always super keen to hear what of this resonates, what questions emerge, what insights emerge, what experiences do you have running retreats, being part of retreats, the best practice in group work or one-to-one work leading up to experiences or integrating. Please do start conversations, if not with us, then with someone. And Christopher, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.